another month is almost over, which means another live-action Disney remake is here. And I also saw Olivia Wilde's Booksmart on top of it. So we're going to go ahead and start with Aladdin. This was obviously one of the ones that, because if I remember correctly, while most of these do, a lot of people kind of turn their nose up at them because they think it's Disney being greedy and unoriginal and all that. And just recycling all their old shit. This one in particular seemed to have a bit more pessimism, I guess, towards it. Especially given the whole, like, I guess it was the concept itself and whether or not it would translate to telling like this. But also the whole Will Smith as the genie thing, which didn't seem terrible on paper, but then I know, obviously, I don't watch trailers, but I did hear endlessly about what Will Smith looked like and saw that particular still image many, many times. And as far as the still image goes, I suppose it didn't look great. But maybe perhaps it translates better in a full feature-length movie. So, especially when you're as big of a fan of Will Smith in general as I am, maybe you'll be a bit more lenient to the criticism to it. But that's not to say that the whole movie kind of earns that sort of not being as hard on it sort of thing. Because I had a lot of flashbacks going into Bill Condon's Beauty and the Beast with Emma Watson, which a lot of people don't like, which I kind of did, but the thing that I was thinking about going into Beauty and the Beast, I remember, and I'm pretty sure the runtimes are about the same, 2 hours and 8 minutes, and it was like, you have the animated movie that is condensed to this really swift, in Aladdin's case, an hour and a half, in Beauty and the Beast's case, it was like an hour 20. And you managed to stretch this out for 38 more minutes, and how you're going to do that. But the thing about that, though, was that I always felt like, when I was a kid, Aladdin always felt like it was longer than the other movies, when it really wasn't. So, because they put so much in that 90 minutes. So it's like, okay, I can kind of see where they might be able to get this to a runtime like that. The trouble is if it's gonna get bogged down at all, because, like I said, that's kind of what the credit you give to the animated movie is that they were able to fit as much as they did in just the span of an hour and a half without having to drag anything out. And it just has this nice flow throughout. Even if, like I said, the only thing that really makes it feel long is the fact that just so much happens in it. I don't really even see that as a criticism when I say that. But in this movie's case, it is kind of all over the place in regards to a flow, I guess you could say, because for the most part, they seem like they're in a really big hurry. Because we do have this opening scene. Before we go into the scene they kind of feel like they're hurrying through, we do have an opening that says, it kind of gives you that awful feeling in your stomach about how they say this isn't the story you think you know and stuff like that. They don't actually say that, and it's not that, but the reason I thought so at first was that after we get the Disney logo, we fade into what appears to be, what it looked like at the start, was a pirate ship. And I got a little worried because it was like, Disney, you do realize that we have all long since moved on from pirates. Can you please do the same? Especially given the quality of those movies as it went on. But no, it's Will Smith on a boat telling the story to two children. Will Smith looking like Will Smith, more or less. And it's like, oh, this is them doing the little guy at the beginning that we know is basically an incarnation of the genie because he's also voiced by Robin Williams. But it's like, would that have maybe been better? Because you do kind of have this whole cliche thing of, oh, it's him telling a story to children, and this is, but we know where he is in the story because he's Will Smith. But the thing here is, would this have maybe been better if it kind of stuck more to what the animated movie was, and it was Will Smith talking to us, the audience, instead of other characters that are just there, to be his catalyst for telling this story. Um, because Will Smith definitely has the charm to just, if he were to look straight into the camera and just start talking to us at the very start of this movie, we probably wouldn't think anything of it, especially since we're already familiar with that way of telling this story. Um, so that was just in there, but then we get to the whole Arabian Nights opening, which we are familiar with, where we get a whole opening title sequence and all that. And this is where it kind of starts to feel like it's in kind of an odd hurry, despite its length. Because, number one, we're introduced to the whole Jasmine thing just instantly, like just as soon as the credits are over. But there's also the scene you remember from the original movie where Jafar goes out with the gullible dude and he sends him into the Cave of Wonders, and the Cave of Wonders devours him, a scene that kind of frightened me as a child. And this is kind of just seen almost in passing, while the credits are still going. And the thing about this also is I do like the rendition of the song that they have done here, and with Will Smith singing it. The trouble is I don't know if this was the sound in my theater or how the movie actually is, but the way it sounded in my theater was that the music was significantly louder than the words. Like, the words were being totally drowned out. So when we're introduced to the Cave of Wonders and it's like talking and we hear that familiar voice, you can kind of barely hear it over the music, and the camera almost just kind of is moving along, which is a nice shot and everything, but it almost just kind of goes past this shot of the dude being devoured, and it's like if I had not seen any rendition of this story before, I would think there was nothing, that scene was related to nothing. When it's the whole setup of Jafar's going to have to look for somebody that ends up being Aladdin. The camera barely pays attention to it as it goes by. And so that whole thing just kind of felt really rushed, and it was like, how much are they going to rush this? And then, oh god, if they're rushing the stuff we do know, are they just trying to leave room for the stuff we don't know? And for the people that, get upset and say that Disney isn't being original when they do these movies, maybe they're looking for original stuff that they're throwing in. But more often than not, if you've seen enough of these movies, you know that maybe for them to just shut up and play the hits is what you want. Because they do add some things here and there that are really here just to bloat the runtime. There's like one or two things here and there that they add that are fine, but we'll get to those as we go along, because one of the first things to look forward to when this starts is the one jump ahead number. And to start off, this actor playing Aladdin is a really good choice, and he kind of reminds me of Oscar Isaac in a way. And the thing about him is that I was kind of won over by him pretty quickly, but I kind of started to like him more and more as the movie went, also. Because he is definitely the character of Aladdin that we know and love, but he's also he's got he almost adds this, the word I keep wanting to use is sass, so I guess that's what we'll go with. He kind of adds that to the character a little bit. And so it still feels like the character we know, but also kind of his own characterization also. Which really does work, especially in the long run. And the same thing for the most part for Naomi Scott, I think is her name, playing Jasmine. Even if she's not quite as... She doesn't get all that dimensional until she gets a big Let It Go-esque song number that they have added. But as far as this first number goes, while it does kind of have the same feel for the most part, there's some things that are a bit weird about it. Once again, I couldn't tell if my eyes were playing tricks on me or what, but it seemed like there were moments where they were trying to be flashy, so sometimes the movement was slowed down a little bit, and sometimes the movement was sped up a little bit, and they would go back and forth on this, and it just looked really bizarre and off. I'm not really sure what exactly they were trying to evoke there, but the only thing it really evoked was confusion. And an aesthetic that didn't really look right. because the sets are like really nice for the most part. Like I was kind of wondering like how sort of like fake and CGI everything would look. Um, but I mean they do really go out with the production design like they often have. Like the production design in the 2017 Beauty and the Beast is amazing. Um, and there's even like small sets like Aladdin's little hideout. Where it kind of has like that extra level to it, where like Jasmine's up here and he's down here, and it's sort of like it also kind of looked like a sort of visual cue on their class separation, despite the fact that he doesn't know who she is yet. Um, and so yeah, stuff like that does work, but as far as like the number itself goes, and obviously there's going to be those moments in I think pretty much all the songs where they change the lyrics at least a little bit, where if you know the songs well enough is a little jarring. And sometimes it doesn't really kind of fit rhythmically in the same way. I don't know if that's just because we're so used to the older versions or what, but yeah, so it just kind of felt off a little bit, and then we're introduced quickly to our new Jafar, who looks significantly younger, and has an Iago that's basically just a normal parrot now. Interestingly enough, in that opening scene in the animated movie, when Gilbert Gottfried's Iago is like pretending to be just an average parrot, but it's like he sees it as like degrading. Well, that degrading impression of a parrot is what what Iago is now, ironically enough. So, and I believe that's Alan Tudyk doing it. So at least we have that. But as far as Jafar goes as a character in this one, there is that moment in the first scene I was talking about that this movie kind of glosses over, where they send the dude into the Cave of Wonders. And just the way we see him and the way he looks against the night, we immediately know that Jafar is the villain, and he looks like huge and everything. And this guy, I can't remember exactly how far into it they said his name, but really, the way he's dressed is only somewhat the way you can tell he's Jafar right away. It's like, when I first saw him, I was like, I think that might supposed to be Jafar, but I need confirmation before I say anything for sure. And it was. And the thing here is that they've taken a lot away from him, Jafar as a character. Basically leaving him to be this really, really, really basic villain. Like, you take away the whole... Like, it's... I don't know if I thought about it that much whenever I've watched the animated movie, but it's like, it's interesting when you take the shapeshifter aspect out of Jafar, just how not much is there. But I mean, you also have you do have Freeman's voice work in that performance also that really makes the character work. That's something that's kind of missing here. There's a sinister quality that the Jafar in this movie just really doesn't have. He just comes off as like some greedy dude that hangs around, and that's about it. Especially the scene when we have the scene in the dungeon in the animated movie when he takes the form of like the old decrepit guy. And but like at the same time you can like tell that it's him. But there's that whole quality to that. That scene here is replaced to he and Aladdin just kind of sitting out in the desert, and him just kind of saying shit about Jasmine just to get under his skin. As you can probably guess, doesn't have the same effect whatsoever. And so, obviously, we're really waiting. Like, it almost got to the point where I almost forgot that the genie was a character in this. Because it goes for... Obviously, in the other movie also, it takes the genie a while to get there. Even if we do get a taste in the beginning, like we kind of do in this one. But basically, we're hoping, even though, people laughed and made a meme out of, Blue Will Smith and all that, it's like, Will Smith needs to be in this movie to put some energy in it. He needs to bring it to life. So just take Aladdin to the fucking Cave of Wonders already and get him to rub the lamp so this movie can do something. Have some sort of pulse. And so that's what happens. And yeah, I don't know how much, if they did, like, any particular touching up since that trailer that everybody freaked out over. came out, but he looks fine. Like in motion and in movie, he looks fine. But I can see the uh, people being afraid that this isn't gonna translate to screen. What all the genie does, like, is he gonna do the morphing into different things? Is he gonna do the pop culture references? Is all of that gonna be here, and will it translate in this kind of telling? And surprisingly, when he is, turning into different things, he obviously doesn't do it near as much as the animated one could. But they do enough with it that I personally feel satisfied enough, I guess. I know it doesn't sound like much of a compliment, but I think it translates a lot better than people might be imagining. But even so, you can tell that they're much more limited than they would be in like a full-on, animated movie. And yeah, that's the thing, is Will Smith basically has to bring the life that this movie's gonna have into it. And he does accomplish that. So like once the genie is in it, then it's much more lively, or it's much more entertaining. The numbers are like really good. Um, the You Never Had a Friend number, like Never Had a Friend Like Me number, is really good also, and kind of gave off the. I felt the same way watching that, the way I did the way they remade Be Our Guest in Bill Condon's Beauty and the Beast. So, which is like, obviously it's not going to have the same feel, but it's well enough. The thing that I did like really really like really liked a lot, actually, was how they did the Prince Ali number. Where they made it feel like really really huge, and when we get like that head-on shot of the parade does look like it's just endless and just massive, just non-stop. And we do every now and then we've got like Will Smith pops up in drag to sing a little bit, which might give you might refuel nightmares of Wild Wild West for a second, just a split second. But the fact that they do take it as big as they can, especially that particular moment in the song, that's always been my favorite bit of it. When in the animated movie, it's when they're bursting into the palace, when that particular note hits. And in this one, they really, really hold it. Like, they really, really build up the anticipation to that particular note. And Will Smith is just, like, dragging it out and dragging it out. So I really love just how much they took that song and, like, really made as big a deal out of it as possible, which is all I would have asked for that one. So, that sequence was really satisfying. Um, I mean, as far as like the rules go, they do the whole thing where you watch the other movie and you're like, how does Jasmine and everybody not recognize him already when he's Prince Ali? And the movie attempts to explain that away with this whole genie magic thing, which basically, but if they explain it for a little bit, but then once it goes on, it's like they're really kind of half-assing exactly the way the genie's magic works. But you can tell they're trying to tweak it to kind of maybe fill in some holes that the other movie had, which is an interesting idea, and I like that they acknowledge that. But I think they could have definitely done it in a much less half-assed way. So there is that. And it is worth noting while watching this one that you would think for a while there the whole idea was to remake movies that we loved as kids and making them like darker and grittier or whatever, which obviously played itself out pretty quick. But still, it is interesting when you think about that to look at this, and when you're comparing the two, this one in some cases feels like a watered down version. There's three instances in particular, well, two or three, where they've taken a scene from the animated movie, and there's a moment of like intended violence against a character, and those are taken out of this. Like, the scenes are there, but the intended violence is taken out of them. Like, take for instance, like I said, the scene that terrified me as a kid was the beginning when the guy gets eaten by the Cave of Wonders, and we barely see that. And I guess they kind of try to replace that and show, Jafar's power in this moment where he like knocks a dude down a well or a hole or whatever the hell that was. This is Sparta hole. He just knocks a dude down. So there is that, but then there's the moment when in the animated movie where Jasmine is, around town. She takes an apple and gives it to those homeless kids, and they almost cut off her hand in retaliation before Aladdin intervenes. That's not, the Aladdin intervening while they confront her is there, but that's not. And then the moment that I really like for Aladdin's character in the animated movie when the prince is coming in and those kids are there and he goes to like whip them and then Aladdin like intervenes and like catches the whip with his arm. Once again, the kids are there, the prince is there, Aladdin's there, but the whip thing isn't there, which I thought was really odd. So it's like those moments where almost violent things happen to characters are just taken out entirely, and so the characters are just like interacting when they could be doing something like that, and so you're like, there's definitely more activity that should be happening here, but it's not. It's totally absent. And it's like you can kind of feel, once again, maybe it's just how well you know the animated movie or not thing, but you can sort of feel those empty little voids when stuff like that isn't there. And it's just like you can feel something's missing, and it's something that kind of keeps carrying her. Like I said, even if it's the smallest thing missing, it's amazing how much you can feel it. And how much it feels like the movie is lacking something as a whole when stuff like that happens. So I don't know, but I was saying though there are some things that they do add. Most of them probably are ill-advised. I think even though it's not like a huge part of the story or anything, giving the genie a love interest, I feel like was an odd choice and definitely something that felt like filler. And then there is another thing they do that's a real problem, and you can tell it's how we got to the runtime we did, is that they stretch the conflict out. Because I was talking about how, for the most part, I like what they've done with the characterization of Aladdin here, where it's the same character for sure, and all the aspects that we like about him, but they've sort of made it their own also. But we do get this point in the conflict when, the conflict obviously is, he promises he's gonna, wish the genie free, but then once he gets the other two wishes, he gets a little greedy. But the thing about it in the animated movie is that Aladdin is like really, really apologetic about that. When he and the genie are like fighting, and it's like it actually hurts Aladdin to want to have to take that back. And this Aladdin, when that scene comes, is so unapologetic, and like we can sort of see him like going into the greed. And maybe that's an aspect some people thought was missing before, but I don't know. It's sort of, to even hint of the character like going in that direction just sort of feels like that was the admirable thing about the character, was that he kind of was able to have these wishes and live this lifestyle as Prince Ali and not completely lose sight of himself like this one almost does. So that kind of sucks. And then, like I said, they really just sort of drag it out also. And the whole thing about, because of the genie magic, he's able to keep up the ruse longer than usual that he's Prince Ali. And it's like, does he or does he not reveal who he actually is? And it's like, we don't really... This is just bloating the runtime. This is all this is doing. Like I said, that 90 minutes we had before fit more than enough into it. So to add stuff like this is clearly just slowing it down and not really adding anything. But like I said, every now and then they do add something that feels like it fits. I like the fact of Billy Magnuson playing the other prince. It's especially amusing after Into the Woods, where he's playing yet another unlucky prince. So there's some funny stuff there, and then there is the dance sequence. And obviously, usually I'm very anti-dance sequence in the middle of a movie, because if there is anything you could call padding a runtime, it would be if a movie has a dance sequence in the middle of it. But the thing about it is this whole setup of it's him trying to impress Jasmine by doing this dance for everybody, but he's under the genie's control when he's doing it. He's like a puppet. And it's like, this is actually something I could imagine being in the animated movie, was him trying to impress Jasmine by dancing under the genie's control. Um, but apart from that, most of their additions, and like I said, they give Jasmine like a whole other song. But it's, like I said, it just feels kind of let it go light. And it feels like they really, really wanted it to be super, super big and really, really feel big and be a big moment for her. But once again, I've got to be one of those people in the back saying, "Shut up and play that." So that's unfortunate. But and we do have the whole new world thing, which I know for a lot of people is like the big scene. But even in the animated movie, it's like yeah, it is like really romantic. But there are numbers that I anticipated more, like the Prince Ali number. So but yeah, I mean it's fine. I didn't feel like the oh, this is romantic in the way you would be watching the other one, but it's fine. But like I said, the whole romance angle is kind of ruined a little bit when they make Aladdin go into almost that whole like full on being consumed by greed territory. But whatever. And then it's even dragged itself out to the point that when it's still doing stuff that was in the original movie, it feels like it's being stretched out. Like when Aladdin gets banished into the snow. It's a scene that we already know and a scene that we're expecting to see. But by the time it happens in this movie, it feels like, wow, it feels like we're doing way too much. So, and of course, if I had to say, take something out to make it not feel that way, I gotta tell you, it's probably not gonna be the new stuff that they've added. That I would say keep. Um, I'm not gonna say cut the stuff that's already in the other version, which, like I said, it completely goes against the argument of, guys, be original. But I mean, if you're going to tell this story, you kind of got to tell this story. You've already committed to that when you decided to remake it. And we know what to do to make this story work, because it's already been done. And it's like, if you want to put the stuff in it that doesn't work, then what are you doing? Uh, so, so it's kind of, you can't really win here in certain cases when you decide to remake this at all. But like I said, I am not anti-remake. So, like I said, if you want to do a different execution of it, like, say, what you did with the Prince Ali number, which I really love, like, if you're going to take the stuff that's here and, like, expand on it or show it in a new, interesting way, then yes, like, by all means do that. Then you have a purpose for doing this at all. Or you have somebody with as much, personality and just this whole sort of hugeness about themselves, like Will Smith. Because you go into it and you're like... Because I remember, as soon as they said, yeah, we're going to do the live-action Aladdin thing, everybody's response was, why? You cannot recreate the genie. Without Robin Williams, you just cannot do it. You just can't. And it's like, when they got Will Smith, I kind of felt like, okay, there is a direction here that can, and it's not going to be Robin Williams, and it's not going to be to that degree, it's not going to be that big, it's not going to be that iconic. But you can still do something with it, and not fail miserably. Uh, and Will Smith does about as well as he possibly could have. And like I said, I easily found him to be the most entertaining thing about it. And that's not just, in comparison with the other thing. I genuinely like what he's doing with the character, for the most part. But yeah, this does have you asking more so than some of the others have. But why exactly? But you can, like I said, it doesn't feel like, it feels a lot more in the writing, that they sort of half-assed it. Because when you look at it from, like, the big production that they put on, it feels pretty massive. The Cave of Wonders scene, when the Cave of Wonders is collapsing and there's all the lava and he's trapped down there, is really, really well done. The effects are pretty amazing on that, where it actually looks like... Because you hear that and your immediate first thought is, there is no way in hell that it's going to actually look like the dude playing Aladdin is right there with the lava and the fire. But it actually does. It looks like he is genuinely this far away from being, like, fried into nothingness. And it's really, really well done. But for the most part, without, some big scenes like that, or when Will Smith is really, making the role his own and doing a lot with it, it's kind of just boring. And you can really see how it just feels like, when it doesn't feel like certain things have been stripped away, it just feels like this whole sort of bare bones thing of, we have to make this break 2 hours for some reason, if it's as if it's some sort of requirement. And yeah, and the fact that you can take a live action version of Dumbo, where they increased a movie that's only an hour long to like an hour 45, which is almost double its original runtime. But Dumbo never felt like it had this many parts of it where it's just like, there's no reason for this. You're not doing anything with it. You're not expanding on anything. Or if anything, you're like watering everything down for some reason. And this is just, it's weird. There's too much here, but at the same time, sometimes there's not enough either. So yeah, so yeah, as you can see, it's kind of all over the place. And then there's also the whole idea of bringing in the modern aspects to it that Robin Williams as Genie did. And it's like, how would that work in a movie like this? Because pop culture references are something that's not gonna always work. In fact, they rarely work. And then they age terribly, so it's like lose-lose everywhere. But Robin Williams as Genie was able to do all of that stuff, to where pretty much everything the Genie does in the original movie is a reference that you can still identify now. And movies today seem much less capable of that when they're doing that kind of humor. So, because I was noticing that a lot of the dialogue seemed kind of odd because it felt a bit weirdly modern. Like when Jasmine thinks that he's stolen something when Abu actually stole it. And he screams out at her like, "No, it's not like that." And it's like that. For some reason, that line stuck out to me as that seemed awfully modern for this setting, and it looks weird. And then there is Jasmine's like handmaiden or whatever she is saying, "Why are you being weird?" when she's trying to convince her to do the role reversal thing, and it just feels off. But then it's like, but at the same time, the movie was able to do stuff like that and put modern things in it, and like you didn't even think twice about it. And you kind of get a glimpse of that. Something I actually would have liked to have seen more Will Smith's Genie do more was the moment where he's trying to figure out if Aladdin had wished his way out of the Cave of Wonders or not. So he replays back the footage, and it's like the Genie watching it in like a crowded movie theater. And it's like stuff like that Robin Williams' Genie would have done. It's like, I would have liked to have seen Will Smith's Genie do more stuff like that that's like really seems sort of out there. But like I said, that is a really hard balance to do. So if they tried that too much, they may have gone off the rails and it wouldn't have worked. But yeah, there were like little pieces of it in there where I feel like it could have worked if they had found the right dosage, and just kind of doing it like once or twice. It's like, maybe you can, grow just a few more balls to do that, but I don't know. So yeah, and of course, it's a Guy Ritchie movie, which I kind of keep forgetting, because this is like the kind of stuff Guy Ritchie does now. I do know he's kind of going back to his roots with that one movie, that's name I can't remember right off the top of my head because it was changed. But it will be interesting to see how he goes from doing these sort of studio movies and then back to the kind of stuff that he used to do. So it's like he can kind of find his way in these studio movies. I particularly I liked his second Sherlock Holmes movie a lot better than his first one, even though the first one's fine too. But so yeah, he works better in this system than I probably would have imagined after watching stuff like Lock, Stock, and Snatch. And it's like, I can't imagine this guy working in the studio system. But no, he's fine for the most part, but I do think it's not like he pulled a David Ayer or anything, but maybe in some cases close, but for the most part, yeah, so it's a total and complete mess, but it's got some stuff here that makes it worth it, but it's, for a lot of people, it's probably what they expect, so that's that's my really messy thoughts on a really messy movie. So there's that. Let's talk real quickly about Booksmart. This is Olivia Wilde's directorial debut, who you know I have really grew to love as an actress over time, and I still recommend Meadowland to like anybody that'll listen to me. Um, and this is a movie that some people were kind of like. I remember when the trailer came out, and the reaction was basically like, "Oh, it's just female super bad. There's not really anything to that." They even got Jonah Hill's sister, so it's like it really feels like that sort of copy. Um, but we did already get female Superbad last year with Bloggers. And I can tell you this is significantly better than Bloggers, and probably significantly better than some people were going to give it credit for just on first sight. Um, where the two leads are Beanie Feldstein and Caitlin Dever. Obviously, Beanie Feldstein, who we got to know in Lady Bird as Saoirse Ronan's best friend, who was very charming there, and kind of like it was one of those cases where you saw her in Lady Bird and it's like, oh, it'd be great. She could probably really work in a lead role if she really got it, and then here it is. And then on the other side we have Caitlin Dever, who I really love so much that I think most people have probably known since Short Term 12. And she's, every time I see her now, whether it be, you know, Justified or sometimes I even come across Last Man Standing and will watch it just to see what she does. And like I said, in any indie movie she's popped up in, Laggies is kind of where I really started to really like her, especially as a comedic actress. And they both just really own this. Like, I really went into it like, I am honestly, I mean, I think Beanie Feldstein's very promising, and obviously I love Olivia Wilde as an actress. It'll be really exciting to see what she does as a director. But I was here. I bought a ticket because of Caitlin Dever. So, but everything ended up coming together, and everything ended up making it sort of worthwhile about it. All three of those main aspects. And the script also, which had like 4 different writers on it, but is a lot more cohesive than that might make it sound. And yeah, and it did have, if there's one thing this movie's probably going to suffer from, it might be too much hype. Because after it started getting like really good reviews, especially out of film festivals, and then it was kind of, I slowly started to know people that started seeing it, and I just kept hearing really overwhelmingly positive things. That's something that might do it in. If you hear too many positive things, you might be expecting a bit too much of it. But still, just really when it starts, just right away, there's a joke at the very beginning, like the very first joke of the movie. It just kind of wins you over immediately, and it's like, if this is this movie's sense of humor, I can probably get into this. When Caitlin Dever pulls up to Beanie Feldstein's house, and they get out, and the song is playing, and they're like dancing, and then the music just stops. The music just stops completely, and they just keep dancing like idiots. And it's very funny and very charming. And then it goes on and pretty much becomes what you would probably expect of a high school comedy and a sort of like coming of age thing, which we're getting a lot of recently, where we had Edge of 17, then we had Lady Bird, then we had 8th Grade, and now we got this. Where it kind of more or less, you can kind of fit all those together. Like, they would probably work as like a whole sort of lineup, and I think they've been yearly so far. And yeah, and it does, one of the compliments I'd heard about it going in was it was one of those movies that subverts expectations. But the thing about it is that writers are getting a bit smarter about cliches nowadays, if you're catching the right movies anyway. It's like if you go more into the indie scene, you'll see that writers are desperately trying to throw cliches out the window as much as possible. Only trouble is that if you see enough of these movies, even, and I hate to, you know, back writers into a corner, because it just kind of becomes lose-lose, because it's like, after a while you get so used to these people getting ready to subvert expectations, you kind of start to expect the subversion of expectations, almost to the point that the cliche might suddenly be a surprise again, if we get too far into it. But no, the writing is still smart enough that there are those curves. Like the whole turn where there's a scene that's doubly satisfying. But what's interesting about when I say doubly satisfying is the first time around it's satisfying because of how you feel about the character, and then the second time it's satisfying because of how much you appreciate the writing, even if it's not in the character's favor. Where it's she goes into a bathroom and she's talking about the college she's going to go to, and she's sticking it to these people that have kind of made fun of her over the past year, and we feel for her when she does that, and like it's like it just feels so good to see her stand up for herself and the way in which she does it, and then the scene kind of gets turned on itself in a way, and continues on after that, and it's like, I see what the writers have done here, and it's like that's really good. That's, like I said, that's certainly not satisfying for the character, but as somebody viewing this, it's like the fact that the writers went that route felt very satisfying. So that's really cool. And then, like I said, the main thing here is the friendship between them. And I'm really curious to see how Beanie Feldstein does going down the road as far as like her co-stars, because it does seem like, as far as Saoirse Ronan and Lady Bird and now Caitlin Dever here, it's like she's so effortless in regards to having chemistry with her co-stars. Like, you watch Lady Bird, and you just immediately through that entire movie feel like her and Saoirse Ronan have been best friends forever. And then you're able to block that out enough when you go into this, because then you watch this and you feel like her and Caitlin Dever have been best friends forever. She was saying in an interview, I think, where Olivia Wilde actually had them like live together, and it was like all of 5 minutes after they'd met, and they thought that was the best idea ever. And you can just kind of see how that must have worked, and how well it pays off, especially on screen. And even those moments where, like, just those little moments in there you can really appreciate. Like, there was one, Caitlin Dever is, like, becoming a master of these. Because I was talking about a while back, I still remember, I think the moment I really loved her character in Laggies is there's, like, one shot that lasts for maybe a couple of seconds of her entering a party. And it's the way that she enters this party that does it. And so, similarly, after this college conversation in the bathroom, Beanie Feldstein kind of goes into this Cameron Fry-esque catatonic state. And to somewhat try to get her out of it, Caitlin Dever is just sort of playing this instrument and singing this little song to her. And we, like, hear this from a distance. Like, it's not something that's in the foreground. And it's great, and it's hilarious, and she delivers it perfectly. And it's stuff like that throughout, whether it be the big things or the little things. This movie perfectly executes both of them. And obviously we can throw a lot of that at Olivia Wilde's direction also to complement that as well, the way she carried this. Because it does maybe seem like... Because when you see first-time directors' movies, especially if they have, you know, enough experience in... like they've been in the industry long enough, you can kind of see that maybe they might be... There might seem like, in some cases of a first-time director, a bit of, like, over-eagerness, and maybe, like, a little too much flashiness when there probably doesn't need to be. But every now and then you can sense that in this movie, but for the most part, the thing that I liked about it was that the way it's handled is not really what you expect of a movie like this. And it's kind of another one of those things that kind of throws expectations out of the way, and it's not even from a writing standpoint. And like how it's constructed and the directions that some of these scenes go are like all in the direction, as opposed to the writing. So, in particular, you've got this party, this murder mystery party that they have found themselves at, more or less by accident. And the way this scene continues on, because here's the thing, this is the comparison I was thinking of, and try to imagine this. The scene is entirely comedic. There's not a serious bone in this whole sequence's body. So you go in, and every room of this party, there is something odd going on. Almost like it goes the surreal route through this whole party scene. And the comparison I was thinking of was, imagine a comedic version of the last 20 minutes of Darren Aronofsky's Mother. Is what this party felt like as they went from room to room, and it kind of got weirder. And this is all before they realize at this party that they've been drugged. And the direction that this scene goes is hard to explain. So you just kind of have to see it. Um, so I definitely commend it for that, and the fact that this scene kind of feels like it comes from out of nowhere in a movie like this, but at the same time, the way this party is set up, by the time it gets to the point that it does before this scene is over, it's almost like, yeah, I'm almost not even surprised we ended up here. So at the same time, it's like, it leads you in that way, but still, even leading you in, the unexpected can happen. um, and it's like, it's so weird to say these things describing a movie like this. A movie that's basically just girls that are trying to get to a party one last time before they graduate. But this is what we have. Um, and it's also little things like, I think it's Billy Lord was the one that was like, just kept popping up everywhere. And the scene just before this, she had dove into like an ocean. And then like 5 minutes later, she's at this party and she's totally dry. And Caitlin Dever are completely stunned, says, "How are you even dry?" And the movie doesn't acknowledge this because it's just in that mindset now. And it gets kind of insane. And this scene is kind of the only scene like that. But weirdly enough, it just doesn't. The movie feels like such this adventure of sorts, I guess, that it's not like it feels totally out of place. It's really hard to describe. But they managed to pull that off somehow. And then we have this whole scene of, like, they have to get information from a pizza guy who ends up lecturing them about the dangers of getting into his car when they're the ones that are trying to seem dangerous, and he's lecturing them about the dangers that could come to them should that happen. And then that ends up in a whole other payoff in itself. And yeah, when you go into this, you sort of expect maybe it's going to be like a party montage movie. God forbid. But no, it does avoid that. There are many parties in it, but it never becomes the party montage movie you might think, like the Project X type movie. Even though it seemed like every time they were at a party, it seemed like we were just one soundtrack cue away from the party montage. And it never really happens. The parties are actually where most of the development comes from. Like I said, either sometimes it gets serious and they're doing like some really serious character development, and some things, the way these two feel about each other starts to come out more and more. And you have this one particular scene between them when they're arguing, and the camera like never cuts. It just stays on this one shot of them. And then after a while, like, the dialogue drowns out, and we can just tell by their faces that they're saying the kind of stuff that would hurt each other. That's really well done. And then, like I was saying, you've got party scenes like that, and you've got party scenes like the murder mystery party that just go practically almost close to Lynchian, if you will. So there's that. Yeah, so there are some moments where, like, when that fight scene does happen, it does stem from a cliche. It does stem from... It comes from a character that's holding back information that they could very easily just lay out. But then, at the same time, it's kind of revealed pretty much in that moment that it's more so a character flaw than a writing flaw, that this information is withheld as opposed to just being laid out and then they can take it from there. So, yeah, they do handle that. If there's another big criticism I have, it's nothing that the movie does wrong, per se, but something they didn't use enough, and that is the fact that Caitlin Dever's parents are Will Forte and Lisa Kudrow. Which sounds like an absolute gold mine. Having those two on screen together, bouncing off each other, playing these weird characters that they do. And for some reason, they're barely here. And it's like, just the casting of them in general, Will Forte and Lisa Kudrow as the parents. That sounds like if you're going to do that, you have a ton of things. Like, you're just going to let them run with it. You have a ton of things up your sleeve for this. But no, they're there just about as much as you would expect a parent role to be. They're in it less than Stanley Tucci and Patricia Clarkson are in Easy A. It's like way too brief. But Yeah, and I find myself wanting to say, but they do use their time when they have them, but they kind of don't. That's kind of frustrating. Especially Kudrow kind of takes a back seat also, but that's. But yeah, I mean, the rest of the movie obviously really works, especially the two leads, and like I said, some of the writing get really clever. Sometimes they do have characters that are like full on stereotypes also, but they find ways to make that funny, even if it might be off putting at first that some characters like so blatantly certain stereotypes. But like I said, there are also characters that go completely against what you might think they are also. So it's kind of you kind of get both at the same time. So yeah, so that's pretty much how I feel about that. But like I said, try to, maybe avoid reviews that are like really, really, really overwhelming when you go in, and you might be better off. So yeah, that's what those two were. I think next week is Godzilla, Rocket Man, and Maw. No idea if I will be able to see all of those, but there's a certain level of interest for all of them, so I'll have to figure out something. Especially with all the stuff I keep hearing about how crazy Maw looks. Uh, that's yeah. So we'll look into that, and then we've got I don't know. I don't know what the hell I'm doing next. There's like 20 things planned, but one of those things will be coming, or multiple of those things will be happening. I don't know. So until whatever the hell happens next is going to happen, that's it.